Transcripts and recordings of the podcast may not be used for any purpose without the direct written permission of the podcast owner. Welcome to LITE It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah Musherah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of LITE It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah Musherah. I am so excited about this week's episode because I have another very interesting guest. And this week, I have an opportunity to highlight a newly published author. You've probably seen this guest on the podcast during season 1 or either season 2. It was during the pandemic. Adrienne Spires is my guest today, and she is the author of Roaring Resilience, Finding Grit in the Lion's Den. Welcome to LITE It Up, Adrienne. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. I am doing well. Thank you
Good,
so
good,
much for
good.
having me.
So I want to thank you for being a returning guest on LITE It Up. It's been a few years. During the time in which you were a guest on LITE It Up, we were talking about domestic violence, and it was during the midst of the pandemic. But today we get to talk about your new book that you've released. And before we do that, I want to just kind of refresh our audience memory on who you are and your background. And then for those who are new to viewing and listening to LITE It Up podcast, I want to give them an opportunity to get to know you as well. So you are from Illinois, but you are currently in Pasadena, California, or that area, but you hold an MS in Education Administration from Eastern Illinois University. And you do have a background of working in the nonprofit space, but you have a unique perspective on domestic violence survivor and being a non-offending parent. You're also the CEO of Lapis Analytic Consulting, so you'll have to tell us about that. But your efforts have been on targeting and preventing and addressing interpersonal violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and mental health issues and reproductive justice. So just a whole gamut of issues that impact women. So I want to make sure you're acknowledged for the work that you do, which also, makes you uniquely qualified in terms of being an author on such a topic related to domestic violence. So just wanted to give the audience that perspective as we have a conversation today about your book, Roaring Resilience. So why don't you share a little bit more about your background, your passion for writing, and why you decided to write this memoir?
Yes, thank you. Before I get started, I want to thank you and I want everyone to know that you took the time to tell me you need to write your story. My sister introduced me to you. We had brunch maybe
Yeah.
4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she went to your book launch and she's like, you need to meet Dr. Aginah.
Hmm.
She said, you need to write your story. And I thank you for introducing me to Destined to Publish and encouraging me to write my story. Because I was like, I want my sister to be a ghostwriter. And you was like, no, you
Yeah.
didn't even know. He's like, no, you need to write your own story. So thank you so much for that. So I am originally from the South Side of Chicago, and I'm very proud of that. I was in Pasadena, but now I'm in Lakewood, California, which is across the street from Long Beach.
Okay.
Um, and I let people know here in California, and it's no dig, it's just more like a joke. And I let people know I'm from the real Inglewood, Engle, not Ingle. But I admire, you know, Southern California, LA, and Inglewood, but I worked in the gender-based violence world. I started out in Urbana, Illinois, working at a local rape crisis center as an outreach counselor. I used to counsel adult survivors of child sexual abuse and adult survivors of adult sexual abuse. I was also a volunteer coordinator, and then I was the outreach um, worker. That was the
Mhm.
title. I kind of
Yeah.
forgot. But I work with other systems and institutions for collaborations and training, because we realized that there were survivors that had co-occurring traumas, and in other systems they realized that there were some survivors that had other, concerns on top of being survivors of sexual abuse and gender-based violence. And then I came to California to work for a statewide coalition addressing sexual assault and gender-based violence. And then after that, I ended up working for a reproductive justice organization. And, there's a lot of intersection when it comes to reproductive justice. I don't know if people understand or even know the tenets of reproductive justice, but there are four tenets. I'll share quickly. The four tenets is: you have the right to choose to have a baby, you have the
Mhm.
right to choose not to have a baby, personal bodily autonomy, and you have the right to raise your children in a safe and sustainable environment with some human dignity. So that can be the right to choose to have a baby, that's Black infant maternal health, the right to choose not to have a baby, that's abortion justice. Um, and I think a lot of people really need to understand what that means. There are some political parties that have weaponized that and have taken it totally out of context.
Mhm.
Personal bodily autonomy is, having a right to choose how you want to move forward with the decisions, how you want to carry any pregnancy to term, and also it can mean domestic violence, sexual assault, and as well as environmental justice. Unfortunately, our community, we experience a lot of environmental racism. And so that really ties into gender-based violence, especially when it comes to our community and Black women. And unfortunately, we're number one in a lot of those adverse categories.
Yes, we certainly are. Um, and just the time that we're currently living in, as you mentioned about how individuals have um, taken this the right to choose to have a baby or the right not to choose to have a baby and have weaponized it in terms of making it focused around political platforms. And can you just talk a little bit about the impact that that has, particularly on our community, in terms of, you know, the stance, how people are treated based upon, their individual right to choose? What type of, I can imagine it has obviously not only emotional impact, but psychological impact as well.
Yeah, so I used to be a reproductive justice manager, and when SB 8 came out of the abortion ban,
Mhm.
the fact I would say this: the fact that the state of Texas um, they had the unmitigated gall to even override a federal law that was an actual law and say, you know what, we decided as a state that we are going to ban abortions, and that our Supreme Court allowed them to do it. They kicked it back to them. They kicked it back like it was just a game, like a football game. And then for them to criminalize it, and we know that in our community, we do not have, a lot of us do not have the funds or access to leave a state for medical care.
Yeah.
Um, you know, a lot of us don't even have access to medical to even purchase, you know, medicine just for a everyday cold or any basic or preventive medication or preventive medical services. But the fact that, um, you know, anything dealing with reproductive health or access to reproductive health has been criminalized, and that impacts us more than anyone else, you know, the Black community. That for me was devastating, but I also knew that that was a bigger picture. Um, and for some of those same states that were putting those laws into place, we know those are some of the same states that kept slavery as laws, and states' rights. A lot of us are, I'm not going to say that. Historically, states' rights are the states that kept slavery into laws. And that's why a lot of states in the South or red states do not want federal oversight, because states were allowed to keep those laws in place to do what they want and how they want and when they wanted it. So it's much bigger picture, but we knew that reproductive justice, um, that was going to impact us totally different. And the fact that it was, you know, in Jackson, Mississippi, how they were being impacted, that women's clinic
Mhm.
that was able to provide those services and support to those women in that community, in that state. And a lot of those states in the South, they have they have turned into maternal deserts, hospital deserts, and they don't have access to those medical facilities in the vicinity where they reside, right, where they live, and they have to drive so far. And some of those same states do not offer medical services
Yeah.
to them.
You know, it's interesting that you also raised that issue of the desert, you know, if you will, because here, even in Illinois, south suburbs, south side of Chicago, very same issue where I recently learned one of the hospitals in the South Suburban area, South Suburban Hospital, no longer has labor and delivery. Um,
Mhm.
and so if you're in the south suburbs, to put it into perspective, and the closest hospital that you can get to is another suburb that's over 15 miles away, you know, that is impacting the lives of the life of the mother.
Yeah.
So this is happening all across the
Mhm.
United States.
And we know that when it comes to Black women and Black infants, that our maternal infant mortality rate or morbidity rate is, you know, 3 times higher than white women. And we know in some states it's 10 times higher. At the end of the day, we know it's higher, and that the death rate is high, the infant injury is high, and that we know that we don't have access to safety, and that we're grieving more than celebrating. It's not a celebratory moment for our communities as much as it is for other communities.
Yeah, yeah, that's so unfortunate. So with your work, I'm gonna say you bring also a personal lens in terms of your history, things that you've experienced. Um, and I want to kind of dive into, because you mentioned at the top of the podcast that we had a conversation about you telling your story. And I do remember us sitting down talking, because I'm a firm believer in everyone has a voice, everyone has a story to tell, and you are the only person who could tell that story in a way in which it will make an impact on the life of someone else. So I am happy that you decided to um, write the book. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm glad that you had a wonderful experience with Marilyn Alexander of Destined to Publish. She was my resource when I released my book as well. So I hope that your experience was just as great, if not better. What was the final, because I'm sure that conversation that we had was like 4 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Mhm.
what um what was the final, I guess, straw, if you will, where you said, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and write.
I was still working at the organization in California, the coalition in California, and the articles were coming fast. Headline, ripped from the headlines, what they say on the SUV TV show.
Mm,
And more Black women and Black girls were coming up dead. And the DV, domestic violence numbers were increasing, Black women. And I was just like, this is insane. And younger girls were falling prey to teen dating violence. But I also was thinking, I just really need to tell my story. I'm getting older. But also, I was really on the path of forgiveness
mm,
for my ex-husband, because for a very long time I was trying to figure out, um, and if this is a bad word, you are the podcast person, so you could
mm,
erase it. But I was trying to figure out, how can I kill this Negro? And it
mhm,
was in the back of my mind for a very long time, and sometimes it was in front of my mind.
mhm,
Like, how I'm gonna kill him. Now, as a victim of domestic violence, and then I was able to get on a trajectory of being a survivor. But when I found out that I was a non-offending parent, and a non-offending parent is the parent who did not sexually abuse their child or abuse their child.
mhm,
When I found out that he harmed our daughter, um, that was a different level, right? That was
mhm,
different, right? I was this lioness who did not protect her cub, and stranger danger was in our house, but I didn't find out until after our divorce.
wow.
Um, and it was actually 20, I think 18 maybe.
Mm, mhm,
Um, I think his mom had passed away, and I called him, to share my condolences. And we talked for like maybe 30 to 40 minutes. And I knew I was at a different place
mm,
then. And I was just at a different place, but then I started thinking about, oh man, God, you really did work with me.
mm,
So my faith is threaded throughout the book.
mm,
And
mhm,
that's when I knew I was at a different place. But for a very long time, from 2005,
mhm,
when I found out that I was inducted into this club, the Non-Offending Parent Club, until I called him to share my condolences with him, I was really thinking, how can I kill his ass,
mm,
um, and you know, gain his trust. I did all kinds of things to gain his trust, and I don't even have a problem with sharing what I did to gain it. A friend of mine told me, you was like a modern day Delilah, uh,
mhm,
you know, willing and Samson. And I did whatever I needed to do because I knew that I was going to get him back. And I figured, I'm going to get away with this. I'll be okay. And one time I was like, I'm going to commit a homicide and make it look like a suicide.
mm,
Um, but, you know, you believe in God, God
right.
will be patient and work with you.
Yeah,
Uh, but as a mother, there's no love like a mother,
yeah.
wanting to protect your child, and just the fury. So it was like my faith versus fury,
Mhm, mhm.
and it was going up and down. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because I know that you mentioned that you didn't find out until 2018 that essentially you were a non-offending parent. When you were married to your husband, obviously, if folks have not been able to tell by the context, that it was an abusive marriage, but you did not know that he was abusing you all's daughter.
Yeah.
Um, at what point, I'm gonna ask this question.
Well, wait a minute. It was
Oh,
2005 when I found out. So
2005. Okay.
yeah, but I didn't forgive until like 2018. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. What I'd like to ask, um, because um, anyone, I should say, who is experiencing violence within a relationship, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, financial abuse, what have you, um, remains in that space for whatever reason, um, until there is a breaking point, I will say, or until they can figure out how to escape that situation. How long were you in an abusive marriage before you were able to leave and escape that situation? And what was it um, that you know led you to be able to break free of that marriage?
So I would say 1994. I didn't get a divorce until 2001, but we separated off and on. Um, it it took for me, I had to play his psychological games. However, he threatened to kill me several times, and I knew that he would have killed me. And so I think that that's another thing. There's people will say, well, why she just didn't leave? People don't understand
Right.
that that is the most dangerous time,
Mhm.
is when you want to leave, that they are willing, that perpetrator, that abuser is willing to kill you.
Right.
We had 5 kids together. We have 5 children together.
Mhm.
Um, I have 5 children by the age of 26. And I did not have multiple baby daddies. He was my high school sweetheart. We moved from Chicago to the Twin Cities, Champaign-Urbana. I didn't have any family down there.
So you were
So
isolated.
isolated. So
Mhm.
there, if you're not familiar with the cycle of violence and abusive
Mhm.
homes, and I grew up with both of my parents, he grew up with both his parents. When you're not familiar with those red flags,
Mhm.
you don't know. And
Yeah.
so it starts off subtle, and then you have some, misunderstandings, some spats, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And some things you learn the hard way. And so it was I would say off and on for 7 years. And then there were some times we were perfectly fine. And
Mhm.
then we
Mhm.
had our explosive phases at
Yeah.
times. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember that when years ago, 20 plus years ago, I used to teach a teen dating violence program when I worked for the Cook County Sheriff's Department, and talk about the cycle of violence with the honeymoon phase. And
Mhm.
then, there's the next phase, and then there's the explosive phase. And then you go back as the victim of this abuse, feeling made to feel like, well, it was my fault, or if I would have done this, then maybe this would not have happened,
Absolutely.
or this person would not have reacted this way. So then that's playing on your psyche, um,
Mhm.
of course. Um, and fast forward, you were able to obviously heal and get to a place of um, forgiveness, but I know that there had to be some work, obviously, that you had to do.
Oh
Um,
my God, it was so much work.
yeah.
I was to the point, there was times that I was like trying to strike a deal with God.
Mm,
I was like, okay, God, there are people in that Bible that you have in the Bible that you want us to read about. There's David in that Bible. Lord knows what David has done,
mhm,
and he has a great lineage. Look who you have at the pearly white gates. We know what Peter has done. Surely you could forgive me if I do what I plan to do. I started quoting scriptures to God. Now, you know what this man has done to my daughter. You talk about children all the time. And one of the things I do say in my memoir is, I don't want other people, other women, or I know there's some men. I don't want victims, survivors to think that they're crazy,
yeah.
because our response, we have normal response to abnormal situations. And I share in my book there when I had to have a meeting after I found out with all these child servicing systems and the sheriff department, the deputies, and all these different people. I was sitting at the table, and I felt like I was sitting at the table of judges.
Mhm.
And I was like, what the? It was like an out of body experience. And everything was so surreal. But it was very, I know in my mind, it felt abnormal, but my response and my thought was normal for someone that was going, who was feeling or experiencing something traumatic. Because I
Yes.
was thinking, well, what did I miss? How did I not know this?
Mhm.
Stranger danger was in my house. We think about stranger danger in a white van, but
Yeah.
this man was, I had a ring, I known him ever since I was 15. So there's all these things like, what did I miss? What did I not know? I thought I was the only one that was being abused. I thought I was the only one fighting with him, but not knowing the research that was out there, not knowing
Mhm.
that the perpetrator is not just abusing one person in
Mhm.
the house. There's another victim.
Yeah, and even when the other piece is this was your husband, the
Mm-hmm.
father of your children
All
and
five.
your child, right? And we hear and in this case, you were not a single mother, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this was not a situation where this was a boyfriend that you had moved into the home and,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, this was your husband.
Yes.
Your husband, the father of your children who perpetrated this act against your daughter. And um, I can't even begin to imagine um, how you felt, but I can also understand the notion of wanting to protect
Mm-hmm.
your child and wanting to make sure that the person who um, took away the innocence and who harmed your child pays for what they,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yes.
I understand it. Um, I just there's something that you shared here in your book that is just standing out to me right now. Um, Roaring Resilience, Finding Grit in the Lion's Den is an inspiring memoir that portrays the transformative power of faith and divine intervention in the face of adversity. And through your journey, readers will witness how God's guidance and protection provided strength and courage during the darkest moments of domestic violence and as a non offending parent. Just that alone, when you think about God's protection, his guidance, you had one plan in your mind
Mm-hmm.
but we all know that God is the best of planners.
Absolutely. Yes.
What transpired for you, or what was the turning point for you where you did not I guess place harm on the person who was victimizing you and your daughter?
It was so many nuggets throughout the years. So, in my book, there's so many threads showing how God had worked with me and how patient God was with me. Lord knows God was patient with me. So starting prayer, one of my classmates from college invited me to prayer sessions. I used to go to prayer on Wednesdays and Fridays at 5 a.m., from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. in Champaign at
Mhm.
Center Hope Church. That helped. Um, and then I was going to church. But I really think, of course, all of that in Champaign and then Chicago. And I had, I went to church when, growing up in Illinois.
Mhm.
But I really believe when I moved to California, that's what helped me. I had no one here. I One of my former mentors slash coaches said, hey, I think you should consider applying for a position here in California. I was like, okay. My twins had just graduated, not just, but they were out of high school. And I was like, okay, I applied. But I didn't know anyone. I only knew two people in California. That was my former coach, mentor, and someone else. And I applied, and it was a long process. And I got the position, and I moved out here. First, I moved to Sacramento, worked for the organization, and then I was asked to move to Southern California. And I was promoted, and I ended up joining two churches, Bible study, prayer, and then I end up initiating and executing a statewide faith project with faith organizations and the organization I was working for faith organizations to do some training and work around prevention of child sexual abuse. And that was, I think, the beginning that God placed me around his ministry of angels, because I still was thinking about, okay, I live in California. I'm gonna go visit and I'm gonna get that Negro. I'm gonna kill him. And if I don't kill him, I'm gonna harm him. He gonna wish he was dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that God took me away and worked with me, and I explained it in the book, but I'm not saying I'm like people in the Bible, but what I do want to share, that God worked with me and took me from one drastic dark place to a place that I was able to write and say, I am a walking and living testimony, because that was on my mind, on my lips. It was the taste of the day. That was me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm just thinking about the type of energy that you were consuming and spewing out there in the universe, though. So thank God that he worked with you, Adrienne.
But this is the thing. I was very calm. And those are the
Okay.
people you have to watch, because
Mm-hmm.
people would never know that. I was
Mm-hmm.
very calm, cool, and collected.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were going through the process of writing the book, um, how how did you feel to be able to um put this pen to paper as you
So,
were writing your story?
Deborah Anthony was
Mhm.
my writing coach.
That was
So
my writing coach. I just love.
I love Deborah. I put her in my acknowledgments, right? Because she's truly this Black girl. I think Black women, we are the all-star, team.
Mhm.
Everybody want to be a part of the all-star team. But she would say, okay, Adrienne, okay, we got to get this book together. Because I needed an individual coach, right?
Yeah.
Got a cohort. And I was like, I know that I could tell a story, but writing it, it's gonna take me some time, right? And so
Mhm.
I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna have an individual coach. And I had so many stopping gaps because the pandemic, then I became ill. I had to stop working. I was on, you know, medical leave, short-term disability. Then my father became ill. It was just one thing after another. And
Yeah.
Deborah's like, girl, you got to get this book written. Somebody don't want you to write this book. But she will read, um, she's like, you don't have to write in order. Just write
Mhm.
the things that you want to write.
Yeah.
And she said, you don't have to just write about the traumatic parts. And I was like, okay. And so that's why my book is part memoir, part history, part analogy. And then I thought about it. I had a life before I met him. I
Mhm.
had some happy times. And so I start off my book um, when I was younger, and we all used to meet at my grandmother's flat building
Mhm.
on Garfield and Marshfield, my dad's mother's house. And how it felt like, we was going to a party every weekend, a fish fry, like a juke joint, and playing, the grown-ups playing cards. And, another room is like a Black barbershop, a political round table and a kitchen, they cooking and talking about church hats. And so I talk about that. I have these stories along the way, talking about who I am and where I come from and our Black community and the strength of our community. Talking about going to all Black school. And, I didn't go to a HBCU, but our elementary schools and high schools was like that. We had that flavor. And then I took my time writing about the traumatic parts and the good times that I did have with my ex-husband. And we did build a bond, but then he was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I shared that. And there were times that, it was harder to write that. And I was like, oh man, writing it, I saw it, but it's different when you write it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then there was times where I was like, what happened to him? And what happened to me that I didn't see it? So I started um, questioning myself. But then
Mhm.
I had to think about it. We were kids when
Mhm.
we met. I'm
Mhm.
55 now. I started writing that book 4 years ago. I was 51.
Mhm.
The things you learn and see in your 50s versus 19, 20, 25, 30 is so different. My
Yeah.
mom used to say, baby, keep living.
Yes.
Just keep living, right? Um, and so there was times that I had really good times writing the book, and there was
Mhm.
times it was a little more traumatic for me, and I was kind of sad
Mhm.
that I gave so much to someone who didn't appreciate the things that I invested.
Yeah.
Uh, and just, I one of the titles of the chapter is a quote from Eartha Kitt, where she said, "A man, is willing to lay you down, but not willing to pick you up." And there was, times that my husband wanted to lay me down, but he wasn't man enough to uplift me and keep me uplifted as his wife and the mother of his children,
Mhm.
right? And to uplift me for the dreams that we discussed intimately,
Mhm.
but his intimacy was so false at times and so immature that he couldn't even hold on to that. And
Mhm.
that was kind of devastating. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then I think back, oh my God, I was much more mature than I thought I was. And he lacked the maturity that I thought he had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. What do you want people to get from this book? Like, what do you hope um, to achieve? Because today is the official book launch, but I know you also had um, soft launch of your book. You a few weeks ago participated in Girlfriends Unfiltered Love and Book Signing Expo. So you're starting to share with people about the memoir. What do you hope that people will gain from reading your story?
I want them to know that there should be no shame, stereotypes, if they are a victim and trying to get on the path of survivorship. I want them to support victims or survivors of domestic violence. I want them to know this is a real thing, and unfortunately, the numbers are increasing rapidly. Support organizations that are supporting gender-based violence, and support, campaigns that, we really need campaigns. So I have the LLC Lapis Analytics Consulting. I don't do data, but I champion evidence, informed information. I champion evidence that's out there, and there's a lot of evidence that's showing what is taking place, and the data is out there. And my goal is to support DV victims, survivors that have the co-occurring trauma of non-offending parents. There are some supports out there, but I really want us to think out of the box and how do we support them. And so I really want people to really realize this is an epidemic,
Mm.
this domestic violence and violence. I know the public health world field, the CDC, they view violence as an epidemic, a public health issue. But what Black women and Black girls are enduring when it comes to domestic violence and gender-based violence, sex trafficking, just
Mhm.
all the violence that we are enduring. it truly is an epidemic, and I would like for us to approach it in a manner that epidemics are approached the way the CDC does. And we really need to look at conflict resolution strategies, um,
Mhm.
and address it from that standpoint. And I know we could do it. You know, we have had so many epidemics, but we really need to support Black women, Black girls, because we have so much to offer, and we have a phenomenal future ahead of us. I'm a
Ah,
mother and grandmother, and I just want the best for us, and I want us to be healthy and whole.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm just gonna say this, it takes a lot of courage um to share your story. Um because oftentimes we hold so much in and we suffer in silence.
Mhm.
So the fact that you were willing to share your story um, will certainly help someone else who may be experiencing this right now. Um, so with your release of your book, where are people able to purchase Roaring Resilience? And what are your plans like to do you plan on doing any book talks, book tours? What do you have planned um, with the new release of your book?
Well, you could purchase my book off my website. Um, And you can also purchase it off Amazon in the near future. And I will be doing some book tours in some cities, bookstores, some podcasts, in different cities. And um, I plan to have these conversations and providing some consulting. I'm looking to do some work with DV survivors
Mhm.
that are also non-offending parents, or if they do not have the co-occurring traumas, and have some projects in place, or plans for that, and also some campaigns and doing some collaborations. But my passion is to work with interfaith organizations. I love working with the faith organizations, and, regardless of what has taken place with other denominations, I know that faith organizations are embedded in communities. I know even if people do not commit to other or put particular faith organizations, people tend to run to them because they know that they could depend on them. And a lot of faith organizations are you know, sanctuary organizations. They provide so many services. And I just believe that they can really help with a lot of the social issues, ills, and concerns. And they are the ones that have helped with social ills in the past, slavery, civil rights laws. And even if they don't believe in reproductive justice, reproductive rights, they tend to provide a place for confidentiality and healing and support.
Well, that is something that I'm sure people can definitely benefit from. I want to know before we wrap up, what if there is anyone who is listening to this podcast right now, watching the podcast, and is um, is a non-offending parent in a situation where they're a non-offending parent, where they are in um a domestic violence situation, what are some, I guess, preliminary steps or resources that one may want to possibly reach out to get some type of support, um because I'm sure that there is someone who is watching right now
Mhm.
who probably needs some support, or the one question that comes to mind is, as you reflect on your experience, what is something that if you weren't able to ask for help, but what is it that you would have wanted someone to do for you to try to help you if you didn't have the ability to ask for what you need? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely, because I didn't have anyone to help me. I
Mhm,
I didn't even have, like, really any supports for DV.
mhm,
So I and there was organizations that knew what was going on. I really think that the DV organization, it would be great if those child servicing systems, DV organizations could offer some supports. And then there's more conversation now about non-offending parents and some supports. Um,
mhm,
but I think that if they could offer those supports and have those conversations, I will say, I take that back. There was one particular person that did support me, and she was a therapist.
okay,
That was, and the crimes victim, through the state did provide like some support,
mhm,
so I could take off work, so my children and I could go to therapy sessions. Um,
okay,
but that was it. But
mhm,
as far as child servicing systems and, you know, that wasn't the option.
yeah,
So I think there's now some supports, but not as many. And that is something that I'm working towards to collaborate. And some of the conversations I have been having are
mhm,
with therapists
okay,
about how can we like really support non-offending parents.
mhm,
And the conversation I have been having is there's not a lot of funding. Um,
mhm,
there are some conversations, and I am going to have a conversation with a group that work with foster families that are in foster, their children in foster care, and
mhm,
some of those families, those mothers and some fathers are considered non-offending parents, but not a whole lot. Yeah.
yeah. I'm glad, of course, that you mentioned that you've, been talking to and doing some collaborative work and will continue to do that with therapists because therapy is very, very important. So hats off to you for just finding ways to help bridge the gap in terms of working with those individuals who are skilled and trained to be able to help victims of DV. So, again, I just want to, with your book, folks can purchase on your website. They'll also be able to purchase on Amazon. What will you have a Kindle electronic edition? Now I'm still a paperback hardcover
Yes.
girl. I okay.
Yes, I will. And a couple of people's like, you should do an audio, because people
Uh-huh.
drive, some people like
Yes,
to listen while they're cleaning up and,
yes.
transporting their kids. And so I said, I will do an audio. Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I was like, okay, I'm open. Yes.
Yeah. Now I have to admit, I finally and now I can't think of the name of the series at the moment. It escapes me. But there was a book that I was looking for at the library. I didn't want to purchase it. I wanted the book the same day.
Mhm.
And they didn't have the physical copy. All they had was the audio book. And since I had the other books that were in the series,
Mhm.
I had no other choice but to get the audiobook because I was
Mhm.
really excited about being able to start the book. But anyway, turned out to be the most amazing
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised because I need to hold the book in my hand and
Yeah. That's me.
feel the
Yeah.
pages. But it wasn't as bad as
Hmm.
I thought. I'm glad that I opened up my perspective and tried something new, but I still went back to my physical book, for the other series. But
Yeah. You know, I listened to a podcast, Bronzeville podcast. Have you ever
Hmm.
listened to that?
I haven't.
Oh, it's really good. Lorenz Tate is in there.
Okay.
Tika Jones, I think is her name. Lawrence Fishburne, and it's about Bronzeville in Chicago. And
Oh,
it was really good. It was, yeah. And I listened to that on my way home from work some years ago, a few years ago. But that was really good. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm excited and happy for you that you have shared your story. And I'm quite confident that this book is going to help so many people. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the great things that you're going to do. And just curious to know, you got any other, do you think that you'll write more on this topic, or what are your thoughts or your plans in terms of publishing any more books that are related to this particular topic?
I do. So at first I was like, I'm just gonna write this one book because I was like, oh my God, this is taking so long. Um, and only because I had so many stopping gaps.
Yeah.
And but I do want to write a book about, I have a goal of a couple of projects that I want to start with DV victim survivors. And I think it's going to be really cool. And
Mhm.
I want to write a book about that process and about our stories, right? And how can we put that into a documentary? But I want it to be a really good documentary.
Yeah.
And I was invited to be, there's some filmmakers at this university down south that I was invited to be a part of their project. And I was just interviewed Friday. And I just think that we have so many stories to tell. And even if they're traumatic stories, I think that our stories can still have some strength to it. I
Mm.
think that those stories that others have and my story can have so much strength that we could look at preventive strategies, preventive walls, and we could show that there's so much healing that could be a part of it. And we could write other stories that what love could look like
Yeah.
and how we don't have to fall prey.
Mhm.
We could set some standards um, and that we could recognize that we didn't all start out as victims and that just because we love someone that were perpetrators and that didn't appreciate our love doesn't mean that we're weak. It
Mhm.
just means we love someone who didn't appreciate the love that we had for them. And just because people don't love themselves, we should not be viewed as someone who did not love, that we didn't love ourselves. How do
Mhm.
you, blame victims who loved and nurture someone who just did not appreciate what they said they wanted and needed?
Right. Well, like I said, I know that you are going to do great things. I'm happy that you decided to release your story. You always have a platform here on Light It Up podcast, so you're welcome to come back anytime, especially to share with us the work that you are doing. So I just want to remind the people. So why don't you? I'm going to let you tell the people um, to go out and purchase your book.
Yes. So thank you most of all, everyone, for joining in. This, of course, is Dr. Aginah's podcast, but thank you for listening to the story that I'm sharing about my story. I am hopeful that you purchased my book, Roaring Resilience, Finding Grit in the Lion's Den. And it is not just a doom and gloom. It will encourage you to support victim survivors of domestic violence and learn about the gaps and also how you can be a person to uplift the the things that's happening that is impacting our community and communities that really need the support. And so, the hard launch will be October 1st. I'm sure Dr. Aginah would have it on her website and share my website and where you can purchase the book. And I look forward to any feedback, suggestions, any comments. And I look forward to hearing from you. And thank you so much.
Oh, all right, awesome. So you all heard it here first. Make sure you pick up Adrienne Spires' new book, Roaring Resilience: Finding Grit in the Lion's Den. There will be the link to purchase the book. Adrienne's website is in the show notes, so make sure you check that out and make sure you share this episode with a family, friend, so that they can hear all of the information in the historical context that Adrienne shared in terms of her experience. So I'm confident that you'll be able to take something from this memoir and be able to um, not only help yourself, but potentially help someone else. So, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Light It Up. I hope you can join me next week to see what interesting guests I will have on the podcast. So, until next time, remember to continue to light it up and shine bright like a diamond. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com. You can also find me on social media using the handle at LITE It Up Podcasts. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.